Pawan Sukhdev here at Yale University. Now, I'm delighted to have with me here Dan Esty. Dan Esty, who was the author of Green to Gold and who was for many years, almost 18 years, here at Yale and was a professor at Yale and now has moved across to the government as the Commissioner for the Department of Energy and the Environment of Connecticut. You talked about some of the success stories of corporations actually recognizing their social responsibility, in a sense capturing the fact that they needed goals aligned with society and behaving the right way, but at the same time doing so in a manner which meets the bottom line targets of the corporation. Would you say you still hold that view?
No, I think in fact what it's turned out is there are a lot of companies who've come to understand that there's good business strategy reasons to pay attention to things like environment and sustainability above and beyond what regulations require. And that begins with companies understanding that if they manage environmental issues well, they can reduce their liabilities that might emerge later if they use chemicals or products that become a problem. Second, there's a lot of opportunity to reduce costs, particularly through a focus on eco-efficiency, bringing down their energy spend, and in doing so, improving their competitive position in the marketplace and reducing emissions. And then I think a number of companies have come to realize that if they can solve their customers' environmental challenges, environmental problems, sustainability concerns, they will have more sales in the marketplace, more loyal customers, more prosperity. So I think there's a series of arguments that a number of companies have now accepted that have them out there in the marketplace trying to do the right thing, at least from a sustainability point of view.
So would you be in favor of a system whereby corporations were required by law, by the accountancy regulators, to actually disclose their externalities? Now today they can do that. Of course, 5 and 10 years ago, the complexity of calculating biodiversity externalities was forbidden.
Well, we already see some examples of this. And I would argue, to answer your basic question, disclosure of the external impacts is a good first step to getting clarity about how to measure them, having real methodologies that allow us to capture those and ultimately to charge for them. And there is some complexity to that, so I think disclosure is a very good first step. And we see already that some number of companies on a voluntary basis are stepping up to this challenge. For example, there's now hundreds of companies reporting on their greenhouse gas emissions through the Carbon Disclosure Project. And there's been a push by that group to expand to water and to think about water externalities. But it's still...
And forest disclosure.
And there's a Forest Sustainability Council that's looking at forest sustainability and whether people are having an impact there. So there are a number of individual initiatives to try and get at this issue, but we still are not doing it on a society-wide or systematic basis. And I think there's a big opportunity to do that and to begin with simply measuring and disclosing how the performance is going, where the externalities are, and that's a first step towards understanding which problems are serious, and frankly, which ones are getting worse. Where are the emissions rising? Where are they falling? And from there, you could really begin to develop a policy framework that captures that and makes it part of the policy framework that every company has to see, and frankly, part of the price signals that guide behavior. If there were a constitutional principle, and of course I'm using that term loosely and kind of colloquially, but if there were a constitutional principle of environmental law, it would be the polluter pays principle, what economists would call the internalization of externalities. And I think we all know that from a policy point of view, that's the right thing to do. But the politics becomes very difficult. Those who are very used to the status quo, which is often under attending to this question of externalities, are very used to the world they live in. And when you suddenly try to change the circumstances and impose a full price on them for the harm they're causing, there can be a lot of screaming and crying.
At CORP2020, we pick up quite a few of these, what we call strands of the new DNA. The new DNA of a corporation that says that social purpose matters, because at the end of the day, it is about being there for the community and the clients that you serve.
When I think social purpose is part of it, and I think there's an emerging concept of social value. I think there's a growing debate over whether companies shouldn't have a broader agenda than simply to maximize the bottom line.
CORP2020, the kind of companies that you speak of and that I speak of, how will they actually succeed when the football field is that tilted?
Well, I think there's two answers. There are a set of problems where companies, regardless of what's going on in the world around them, regardless of the regulatory framework they're operating within, will find it in their interest to do the right thing. So when it comes to changing out the lighting or becoming more eco-efficient in general, reducing their energy spend, companies will do that because it's a win-win situation. They can reduce their emissions, reduce their environmental footprint, and save money, become more competitiveness. Improve their competitiveness, become more prosperous. But there is a second set of problems where if a company chooses to do the right thing, but they're in a regulatory environment where none of the competition is asked to do the same thing, they're going to have a competitive disadvantage.
Sure.
So if you have a company that says, no, we refuse to use the cheap coal-based power that's available where we're located, and they insist on expending money for more expensive renewable power, that's a big cost disadvantage.
Sure.
It might be sustainable in a narrow market niche where people are willing to pay a premium for an environmentally superior product or service, but that's not going to be taken to scale by companies in general. So we do have to have policy intervention that improves on the regulatory framework that send market signals to these companies.
In other words, we do have to address issues like resource taxation and issues like disclosing externalities. I mean, there are some companies in spaces where there's manufacturing, there's a way of doing it which may be more energy efficient, more eco-efficient as you call it, and other ways of doing it where consumers may not actually differentiate. At the end of the day, price determines most of them.
Some of these things can be improved by information. Some of them, if you tell people what the right answer is, they'll do it. But there are a significant number of cases where the cost of doing the sustainable thing is not going to get captured.
Far too much, yeah.
So we really have to have a better regulatory framework that, as you say, internalizes those externalities, faces people with the true cost of doing business in a certain way. And until we get there, it'll be hard to really optimize across all of society our environmental or sustainability outcomes.
And the policy framework will lead us invariably to a rediscussion or at least a reevaluation of taxation. And frankly, I'd like to hear your view on the extent to which we use resource taxation. It's available as a toolkit.
Well, speaking as a Yale professor, I think we can say that there are significant opportunities to use those price signals, to think hard about whether we shouldn't have people pay for the harm they cause. This is a long legal tradition of protecting property rights. I think protecting property rights is very important.
Sure.
And I think I should not have a right to spill my pollution harms onto you. You know, the legal framework going back 500 years protects you from that harm being inflicted by me on you. And the tort system is designed to do that. And we have at times used the regulatory process and requirements of the law to ensure that I'm not causing you harm. And I think we've got to re-examine how we do that and to really look more carefully at whether we can't make that more robust.
And polluter pays means that the polluter might pay tax.
Every government in the world is short on funds. And if we could switch the foundation of taxes from charging corporations for the good they do or individuals for the work they provide and shift to taxing rather than goods, taxing bads like pollution, there is a political logic and perhaps a budget logic that would be, I think, framed right, potentially interesting.
Well, you'll be delighted to hear that at CORP2020 we are actually calling it taxing the bads rather than the goods, and we are very keen that one should look at the opportunity with taxing resource extraction, taxing, if you like, emissions as well, because at the end of the day, even market schemes turn out to be a drag on the bottom line. They are a kind of implicit but more efficient tax in that sense.
Well, I think there's a big opportunity here in getting the policy framework right for the kind of world that we're going to live in, and to ensure that companies are guided to do the kind of things that society needs done is very important.
Dan, delighted to hear this, and delighted that you are back here with us at Yale. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure being with you. Good luck with the project.
Thanks. That was Dan Esty speaking here at Yale University on CORP2020.